Welcome back to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference, empowering the good. And we're honored to be talking about a statewide effort with the Tennessee Innocence Project. We're joined by their senior legal counsel, Jason Gichner. And Jason, how are you doing?
I'm great, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with some history and context. Relatively new organization. Give us some history for the Tennessee Innocence Project.
Sure. So originally, there was an Innocence Project that was run out of the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and it was a student-run clinic, and that was running for a period of time. And then several years ago, we started up when that clinic sort of had closed down, and we became the first full-time, on-the-ground, standalone organization doing innocence work in Tennessee.
Before we talk about your model, give us some of the statistics or numbers. When you talk about the prevalence of those who are wrongly convicted, because sadly there are those who are innocent, but they're wrongly convicted. How do you paint the picture of what that looks like across the state of Tennessee?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, if you're looking at Tennessee statewide, since 1989, up until recently, there had only been 24 exonerations throughout the entire state. And if you look at other states and you compare Tennessee, you'll find that there's a lot more exonerations going on in other places. So you ask yourself the question, is Tennessee just better at criminal justice than everybody else? And the answer to that question is no. The truth of the matter is, because it's only recently that we've had a full-time organization focused on these issues and working on these cases, we haven't seen the results that we should see. And I'll give you a further example of what I mean by that. In Nashville alone, as of this morning, we've had three exonerations in the last 6 months. So, if you were interviewing me last year at this time, I would have told you that there's 25 exonerations since 1989. As of today, there's 28. And that's because there is an organization that is working on these things and thinking about them and devoting all of our resources to this. And, to follow up in terms of, is this a problem here? What does it really mean in terms of the numbers? At any given time in the state of Tennessee, there's probably about 30,000 people that are locked up in prison. It's impossible to know what the percentage of people who are wrongfully convicted are, but pretty much everybody across the board will tell you, look, it's at least 1%. It's probably a higher number than that, but let's assume, we're working off of that very conservative number of 1%. 1% of 30,000 people, that's a lot of people in Tennessee jails right now that are serving time for things that they didn't do.
Go ahead and dive into your model and how this works, because when you talk about someone who's wrongly convicted, on their end, it takes a lot of pulling different puzzle pieces together to prove their innocence. But on your end, as a separate entity, you can pull all these pieces together much easier. And so talk about the model and how it works.
Yeah, so by the time folks get to us, most of the cases we're working on, they happen a long time ago. And you're talking about folks that have made it through a lot of different aspects of the criminal justice system. So, typically somebody would have been charged with a crime. They would have either pled guilty or had a trial. There was probably a direct appeal on several levels of that trial. There was a post-conviction hearing, which is where they could have gone back to court and argued about different constitutional violations that happened. Sometimes there's even claims that are brought in federal court. And these go on for years and years and years. So by the time somebody gets to us, a lot has happened. There have been a lot of lawyers, there have been a lot of court proceedings, and legally it can be challenging to get back into court. So there's a couple different ways we can do it. But one of the things that we're always looking for on every case is what new evidence is out there, particularly is there new scientific evidence, is there new medical evidence, is there new DNA evidence, whatever it might be. Because fortunately, under Tennessee law, there's certain type of forensic evidence. Like if you've got new fingerprint evidence, if you've got new DNA evidence, if you've got new medical evidence, then we have a chance that we can go back into court. We can tell the story. And, that's what we've seen in these last several exonerations we've had. The two that just happened was a case where people were convicted of a murder based on bad medical evidence. And we were able to get the real medical evidence to get to the truth that they didn't do it. The case before that was a DNA case. But there's lots of other cases out there that have nothing to do with science, where there's innocent people who are convicted. And, those can be challenging to get back into court. So, it's sort of a two-step process. I mean, on the one hand, you've got to do the investigation and you've got to go back and look at a case that happened maybe 20 years ago. And you've got to find the evidence, the witnesses, whatever it may be. And you may have all of that stuff where you feel like you've really got a good claim that somebody's innocent, but then you still have to figure out procedurally, how can I get this back before a court? It's not always good enough to say, look, I've got the goods. If all of this information was presented before and rejected, that you might not be able to get back into court and ever be heard about it, which is a real challenge.
What's the bandwidth that you and your team can handle when you look at having to pull all these different pieces together of the puzzle and the story? What's an expectation of how much you and your team can handle at a given time?
Well, I mean, I think we do a really good job of being careful of not taking on more than we can at once, because as you correctly point out, Jeremy, these cases take a lot of time. And, sometimes the litigation has been so long in these cases that, you've got a whole room full of paperwork that just to even read before you get started on the case. So, we are a growing organization and we will continue to grow. And, as we grow, that allows us to take on more work and help more people. We're really lucky in the sense that there are a lot of really great lawyers and great law firms in Tennessee that have been willing to partner with us and work on cases pro bono. And that makes a huge difference. It allows us to take on more clients and help more people than we'd be able to do just on our own. So, we're continuing to grow. That's been great. And I think as we expand, we'll be able to do more. And there's the need for it because, like I said, we're the only full-time organization in the state doing this work.
You don't have to obviously name names, but give us a story of success. And I mean, success probably isn't the right word, but give us a story of being able to show someone's innocence and free them and give them a new life trajectory because of your efforts.
Sure. I mean, I'm thrilled to get to talk to you about a case we were in court on just this morning. We had 2 exonerations this morning for 2 folks that were convicted in 1988 of a murder and a rape of a child that they didn't do. One of those people, a gentleman named Charlie Dunn, passed away while he was in custody. The other person, named Joyce Watkins, served 27 years in prison. And she had half of her life taken away from her for something she didn't do. And then she got out of prison. She was on parole and on the sex offender registry. And, just her whole life was taken away from her. When she was arrested, she was living in her home in Nashville that she owned. She had a full-time job. She had never been in trouble with the law before. She was in the process of adopting a baby. And now all of a sudden she's convicted of a murder and rape that she didn't do. And, as of this morning, all of those charges against her have been dismissed. She's no longer on the sex offender registry. She's not going to be on parole. And most importantly, her name is cleared. She's a good person that something really bad happened to. And because we were able to go out and find the medical evidence to show that what had been presented to the jury in 1988 was wrong, Joyce gets her name back. And that's huge. And days like that are just great for us.
I'm trying to think of how to phrase this, but what advice would you give us? Because at any given point, we could be thrown in jail and we could be convicted of something that we didn't do. And so how can we be more proactive and intentional to safeguard our innocence? And obviously having great legal counsel is a big piece of this, but what advice, what general recommendation would you give us to be more safeguarded to protect our innocence?
So, I mean, you're right. The first step is really to get a good lawyer who's willing to fight for you. And there's lots of good lawyers in all different capacities. Sometimes you spend a lot of money and you get a really good lawyer. Sometimes you get a phenomenal public defender who helps you. I'm proud to say that I worked for 10 years in Nashville as a public defender. And, one real piece of advice I would give folks is that they should really play a role and be involved in everything that's happening in their case. You don't want to, when the discovery comes in, when documents come in, you need to read them and you need to ask questions. I can't tell you how many people we talk to that by the time they get to us, they may as well have gone to law school because they know more about criminal justice in Tennessee than lawyers who have been practicing for many years because something really bad happened to them. So then they spent the next 15 years of their life learning everything they could possibly do to figure out why that was and how the criminal justice system works and, what options they have available to them. people should be that invested as soon as something happens, right? I mean, ask questions. It's your life, and you need to trust the person that's representing you. You need to trust their advice, but you also need to be involved, and don't be a wilting flower. And if you're concerned about the way things are going, you need to speak up.
Go ahead and talk about how the community can help. As you mentioned, thankfully, there are law firms and lawyers that are stepping in and working pro bono to help lift, which is awesome. As a nonprofit, financial contributions to help underwrite your efforts is greatly appreciated and needed. But talk about the different ways the community can help.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about both of those things. I mean, obviously, we are a nonprofit, so we depend upon, the good folks in Nashville who believe in the work we're doing to support us. And we're super grateful about that. And we've had a lot of interest all over the state, and people in Tennessee care about this work. So yes, we're grateful about that. Any support people want to give, we always gladly accept. But really the biggest thing I would tell you, and the message I always give to people, is if you want to help us talk about this issue, let folks know that wrongful convictions are really a thing. We all want to believe that the criminal justice system works right every time. And if you're guilty, you're going to prison. And if you're innocent, you're not. And we can believe that our system is getting it right most of the time while still acknowledging that mistakes are being made. And those mistakes are tragedies, and they tear families apart. And every time one of these stories comes out and you hear about folks like these folks today that served 27 years in prison for something they didn't do, it's almost too much to comprehend. So it's critically important. And this is the reason why we're grateful to talk to folks like you. We're grateful to go into schools and colleges and have conversations with people. This is an issue we want folks talking about and recognizing that it's a problem, because once we get there, it has a waterfall effect, right? So not only are people going to be like, this is a problem, we should support organizations like the Tennessee Innocence Project, but just as importantly, I would love folks to be thinking about, well, what do we need to be doing to make sure things like this aren't happening on the front end? In an ideal world, nobody would need us or the work that we do, right? We'd be getting it right. We wouldn't be sending innocent people to prison. And there's all sorts of ways that we can improve our criminal justice system so we would have less wrongful convictions. The system's not perfect, so mistakes are always going to be made, but we could be doing better than we are.
How has this work changed you? You mentioned being a public defender for a long period of time, and now obviously with what you're doing with the Tennessee Innocence Project, how has this work changed you?
I don't know so much that it's changed me as much as I'm just lucky, right? Like, I get to have a job that I enjoy coming to every day, and it gives me purpose in the work that I'm doing. And, not everybody gets to say that about the work that they do. So I'm just grateful for getting to be a part of this. The folks that we get to help desperately need the help and are incredibly appreciative of our team representing them. So our clients are a pleasure to work with, their families are a pleasure to work with, and I care about the work, and I want things to get better in my community and in this state, and I don't want things like this to happen. So getting a chance to work on these issues every day is something I feel really lucky that I get to do.
Yeah, for me, I look at this as social justice and civil rights. And when you talk about someone being wrongfully convicted and in prison for 27 years, to get out and have their freedom, knowing that you were their last hope, their last chance, but to get out and have their name cleared, their reputation cleared for them as an individual, but for their family, that's a legacy. That's a watershed opportunity when you talk about creating transformation, life transformation. So that's why I think when you look at what you do, I love it, but two, also reasons for the community to support the Tennessee Innocence Project, it falls to me under that big picture of civil rights and social justice and life transformation. So I love it. I love everything you're doing with the Tennessee Innocence Project. Wrap up on your end with contact information, website, social media. Where do we go to learn more about the Tennessee Innocence Project?
Yep. So, you can look us up online. We're the Tennessee Innocence Project. We're very easy to find. We'd love folks to reach out to us. You can call us. We're active on social media, so you can follow the Tennessee Innocence Project on Instagram, on Facebook, on whatever your social media of choice is. But we love hearing from folks, right? I mean, we get asked to speak at a variety of places. We're always happy to reach out and do that because, as I was saying before, Jeremy, we want folks to know about this issue. We want people to care about this issue. We want folks involved. So, we're grateful for the opportunity to be here with you today, and we're grateful for the opportunity to spread the message of our work.
The website is tninnocence.org. So tninnocence.org is the website, easy place to find them. You can also find them on Facebook at TN Innocence Project, on Twitter at Project 10 TENN, and then you have TN Innocence for Instagram. So all over social media, easy places to find them. Once again, the website, tninnocence.org. Jason, thank you for all you and your amazing team do. Thank you for coming on the show.
Jeremy, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.